Right now, let's go to our Monday markets. This morning, Zoe Wallace, Forsyth Barr, is with us, thanks to our partners, Forsyth Barr, of course. Zoe, good morning.
Good morning, Ryan.
So, what are we looking at?
Well, we had payrolls data out of the US last week, which was big focus for markets. So that was slightly weaker than people had been expecting, or meaningfully weaker actually, with including some backwards revisions. So what that means is that essentially the labour market or unemployment is going up in the US, labour market slowing, hiring slowing down. What that has meant is that everyone is now all bets on for a September interest rate cut from the US Federal Reserve. That's basically fully baked in. With some chance that they might even go 50 in prediction markets coming through. So very much seeing sort of a cooling in the US economy starting to happen as a side effect of various things. But that will be very closely watched by markets this week. And we've also got US inflation data out this week, which is the final piece of the puzzle ahead of that upcoming US Federal Reserve policy decision next week.
Yeah, which is running at about 2.7% at the moment, right? The numbers from Friday, I was having a look at them yesterday. So they were forecasting adding 75,000 jobs. This is for August. Actually, they only added 22,000, so way below what they were expecting. And total jobs added for May, June, July and August of this year combined equal only just August of 2024 alone. So is this a sign that the economy there is in real trouble?
Yeah, look, I'm glad you've been doing your homework, Ryan. It's great to, what we really saw was actually that for the first time since COVID, actually June had an outright contraction in jobs numbers added or detracted actually. So definitely starting to slow, weakness coming through. The other side of the puzzle though is what's actually happening with the amount of people in the labour force and the amount of people searching for jobs. So when you look at their unemployment rate, it's now gone up to 4.3%. That's still relatively low in the scheme of things. You know, you compare that to New Zealand where we've got a 5.2% unemployment rate. So it's not that bad. And part of that is the fact that they've actually got fewer people just searching for jobs in the economy, lower migration having an impact on their workforce as well. Look, I think clearly there is a slowdown happening in the US, and it depends on the sector you look at and it depends on the region you look at. But the US economy is cooling. And that is allowing the US Federal Reserve to continue to cut interest rates. And that's very much the expectation. A bunch of analysts have now sort of suggested 3 rather than 2 interest rate cuts may come through this year. So opening the door for the Fed to take more action to help support the economy.
All right, and over to New Zealand. What's the latest data telling us about migration?
Yeah, so that's out this week, and look, it's still expected to be pretty subdued. What we're seeing is that, we're still seeing quite a few people heading overseas, particularly New Zealanders, moving both across the ditch and further afield. And arrivals numbers have continued to contract recently, and that's partly a result of the weaker labour market here, so fewer employers looking to recruit from overseas. And relatively more attractive labour markets internationally at this point in time. So likely to see that remain pretty subdued, and obviously that makes it harder for our economy to grow without that natural boost from population growth.
Yeah. On the plus side, though, we have had positive retail card spending data for the last 2 months, slightly positive data for the last 2 months, right?
Yeah, look, the retail sector has shown a few more green shoots, but it is still rather patchy. So we are looking towards card transaction data that's out this week. And then obviously we get Q2 GDP data out next week, which will be a real key focus point. But I think everyone knows that Q2 was going to be weak. It was pretty tough through that part of this year. What we're looking to is sort of signs that things are actually on the up and starting to improve. And while you've obviously had a few local retailers having a pretty tough time of it, looking at liquidations and closures as well, we are starting to see a bit more positivity come through in the consumer spending side, but it's still pretty tough out there for your average consumer.
Thanks so much for that. That is Zoe Wallace from our partners Forsyth Barr.